Daryl Recommends Podcast is a podcast recommending series and shouldn't be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each show are my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
Hello everybody, my name is Ron Megaron, and this is Just a Little Guy. It's a podcast in which I collaborate with some of my favorite folks from around the world, and we whip up a brand new batch of beasties for all your creative needs. It should be noted that while we love all of our little critters, some of them will get a little bit more love than the rest. And if you sign up on our Patreon at the $5 tier, you'll be able to cast your vote on which of these creatures will be unleashed onto your choice of tabletop battlefields. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, or if you just want to help support the show, be sure to drop by patreon.com/justalittleguy. That's JUSTALILGUY. Not little, Lil, like your favorite rapper. Okay, now that I've gotten that out of the way, I would like to welcome our first guest, the biggest guest that we've had so far, and possibly ever. He is a prolific DM and defensor by trade. He is the host of What's Left of Us, it airs the last Friday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there or be square. Mr. Jacorn.
Yeah, you can stop right here. You first guest, best guest, right?
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. No, I'm ending the
No
show
need-
after this. Yeah.
Right. Just the.
We
best-
join Ron Swarthout and guests as they make monsters. In between discussions of hobbies, interests, and of course, D&D gushing, we see what creatures come from the minds of each new creator on the show. Just a Little Guy is an interview podcast / monster making game where Ron and fellow creators collaborate on creating new creatures and crawlies for tabletop games, stories, or to just get those monster making brain juices flowing. Currently, it's a short show with only 10 episodes, but with hours of enjoyable monster making content. So I listened to this one fairly recently because during my wonderful podcast listening spree, I had reached the point where I was getting a little burnt out on fictional podcasts and decided I needed to spruce it up a bit with something that wasn't so much of a story-based podcast. Granted, there was a lot of time where I wasn't listening to podcasts for a couple of weeks back in February, so that burnout quickly went away, but this was what I listened to in between that whole period. So I really liked enjoying listening to this. It's very short. I mean, the episodes are very long. There's like one episode that's 3 hours long, but in terms of like episode length, it's only 10 episodes currently, and I believe there's going to be more episodes coming out pretty soon, which is nice because I want to see more monster making. As somebody who is writing a horror comic, I like making monsters, and I like seeing other people make monsters. And it's just like, even if the art of this video is just me designing a crawly for my comic. By the way, I have a horror comic, in case you couldn't tell. But it's a very enjoyable show. If you don't know who Ron Swarthout is, he is one of the players that I mentioned for the podcast What's Left of Us. He plays Vernon. And he actually interviews 3 of the players, and their DM, 2 of the players and their DM from What's Left of Us. So if you want to see him, Jay, Star, and Zoe make more monsters, then this is a show for you. I believe all 3 of them are in the first 3 episodes, which is nice. And I just like hearing about this different stuff different creators make. There's a couple people whose things I've never heard of before, a couple that I've seen mentioned before, like Solari, and just like nice enjoyable discussions. I really enjoyed the 10th episode because I really liked Dan's story with the bard that he made. And when he was talking about why he can't really play D&D, that was a lot of fun. And it's just really great. And the monsters they come up with is pretty cool. Usually what happens is the Monstermatic 3000, which is the machine that Ron uses to create prompts for the show, gives them like a name or a ability or a setting that they have to base their monster design off of, and then they go through with creating the monster. And sometimes they'll come up with something that is like kind of silly, like they had the Tater Tarantula in Jay's episode, but then they'll come up with stuff that's like kind of outright horrifying, stuff that gets a bit existential, and it's just generally a lot of other things. And I think that it's a lot of fun how they go about with doing this podcast. And because as somebody who's a fellow monster enjoyer and a fellow fan of D&D and tabletop games, which they talk about Monster of the Week a lot, which is like my favorite tabletop RPG system, so I very much appreciate that as somebody who has a defunct tabletop RPG show that uses Monster of the Week. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and I enjoy the monster talk. And just one of the cool things is that with their Patreon, they vote on which monster from the episode gets a stat block, which is pretty cool. They make a lot of really cool monsters. And it just so if you're somebody who enjoys the topic of monsters, topic of D&D, tabletop RPGs, all that, then this is probably a show for you. I think you'd really enjoy it. And like I said, it's not really long. There's not like super much to talk about in terms of like individual episodes because there's only 10 episodes. But it's still a very nice show if you need something to freshen up in between listening to your Monster Story podcasts like I do. But yeah, no. So if you're also worried about like anything like triggering content-wise, because this is a show about monsters, some of the monsters are a bit disturbing, but not so much in the like vein of like other than existential fucked up things to think about. Nothing like explicitly horrifying and like being like this guy goes in and rips his prey's ribs out one by one and other horrifying, gruesome stuff that I absolutely love. Nothing like that, but you know, it's a show about monsters and making monsters. It's like a show about being Frankenstein. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed the show. I love the interview bits of it. I also just like listening to people talk about this work they do, because it's very interesting to learn about people and then like also see a way of expressing a creative process while, you know, talking about the things they do. And everybody's so different with how they go about with making monsters. And I just think it's like really cool with it. And also like previous interviewers will give the next interviewer like, I believe it's like a name that they have to make their monster based off of, which is like also a cool way of getting different people who are interviewed to collaborate with the next person being interviewed. And I just think that's really neat. It's really cool how it's done. Okay, so anyway, that's all I got for this episode. I'm going to link Ron's Patreon down below. I also suggest you guys should go check out What's Left of Us. Like I said, he's a player of the show, and his character is very enjoyable. If you love crabs, if you love the Silverses, if you love crabs, especially crabs, you would like what Ron's got going on, because it gives me just I love crab god vibes. So that's all I got for today. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you go check out Just a Little Guy, and maybe it'll inspire you to go make your own little guys. I know it has for me. That is all for today. Goodbye!